Morning. Right, I need to do chapter 7 again because it didn't upload or something, I don't know. Alright, so, hang on. Chapter 7. It's quite cold out there today. Lucky Spoon. The sun hadn't even peeked over the horizon when Arthur and Maudie woke. They sneaked downstairs and rushed through the morning routine of cleaning out the fireplaces and sweeping the floors. I can make up some excuse for the dockmaster, but Beggins will know something's up when you're not here. When she wakes, Maudie said, shutting the front door behind her. I'll say I went to Ratchet's to pick up her supplies. I can get them on the way back. After a quick wash in the street pump, Arthur and Maudie headed north into the heart of Longtown. With its domes, towers, and great brick-fronted houses, eventually they came to the street listed in the advertisement, Archangel Street. The houses were trimmed with ornate iron balconies, threaded by rose-coloured vines, arranged around a central square garden. Maudie brushed Arthur's wayward hair through with her fingers. We look like a pair of ragamuffins. Then she untied the ribbon and retied it around a wayward lock of her hair, holding it back from her face. Arthur started up the street, looking at the numbers 20, 18, 16, each one identical in its perfection. They carried on until they stood before number 4. He looked at the advert, clutched in his hand, then up at the house. He frowned. It looks as though someone's jumbled up the pieces, he said. Number 4, Archangel Street, stood alone from the rest, and it looked unlike any buildings that he'd ever seen. It was smart as its neighbours, with fine brass hinges on windows with polished frames, but it was crooked, as though the house insisted on doing its own thing. There were wooden panels with metal rivets, windows of different shapes, round and long and square, with intricate shutters on pulleys. Curious creatures were emblazoned in stained glass windows at the top, and the whole roof looked as though it had been put on sideways. This is some house, he said. Wow, look at the mechanism on the windows. Some kind of auto winder by the look of it, Maudie said. Are you ready? Arthur said. She nodded. Arthur's stomach turned over with nerves. He wanted it so much. What would Dad have told him? He remembered what he'd said before he'd left for the expedition. Fear kills more dreams than failure ever will. You can be comfortable or courageous, never both at once. There was a scuffling behind them. Arthur turned and almost bumped into a rather round and tall woman stumbling off the curb. She cursed in the foulest language he had ever heard, and a huge silver spoon fell from her coat. Arthur bent and picked it up for her. He looked at her curiously. The woman clutched a piece of paper the same as his. She wore a little tilted hat that looked like those the gentleman at Uptown wore, and she had frizzy ebony hair. A heavily skirted coat bulged out like petals at the waist, and her enormous feet had been squeezed into what appeared to be gentlemen's brogues. She took the spoon from him and smiled. It's me lucky spoon. Not that it's brought me much luck today. Bleeding shoes are 4 sizes too small. You'd think in the whole of Longtown I'd be able to get a pair in my size at short notice. But, well, you think wrong. Yes, she would, Arthur nodded politely. He did his absolute best not to look at her extraordinarily large feet. Are you here for the evaluation? She looked at them with narrowed eyes and a knowing smile, one of her eyebrows raised independently of the other. Why, you look like a pair of scarab bunnies. Maudie smiled and said, It just means a lot to us. It's a nervous-wracking business for sure, an evaluation, and one could easily turn it from it at the last minute. Like when I applied to go with the aquafreeders on that expedition to the island of Nimi. I stood outside for a whole time before I got the courage to go in. Mind you, I got the job and wished I hadn't, because I had nothing to cook but blatant seaweed. and spinefish for weeks on end. And they tasted worse than a sea sailor's stinky shoes, I tell you. She took a big breath. I've had only sky ships from then on, so as Granny said, if you want the best eggs, go straight for the goose. She smiled. I know, we're all going together. She talked a lot, but Arthur took an instant shine to her. Thank you, but honestly, we're all right on our own. She ignored him. Felicity Wiggity, pleased to meet you. She reached for Arthur's right hand, looked down and back at his face. Oh, will you look at that? Her cheeks flushed beetroot. Dreadfully sorry, Sonny. Arthur tucked the advert in his pocket and extended his left hand. I'm Arthur, he offered. Pleased to meet you, Arthur. Now, there's a story behind that arm and no mistaking it, and I'm dying to know, but now's not the time to ask. It's something for friends to discuss, and I've barely made your acquaintance. Her cheeks blushed redder. Brings a whole new meaning to putting your foot in it. She stared at her feet. Ha! Putting your foot in it. Who would have thought? He could feel Maud itching to give Felicity an arm story, but there was no way of getting a word in. Arthur and Maudie couldn't help but laugh. And this must be a twinny. A fine pair you two make. No mistaking. Like popples in a pod. Matching freckles and dimples to boot. I can tell you we're all going to get on, she said, hooking Arthur's arm. After all, I'm footloose and fancy-free, and you're completely harmless. She put her hand over her mouth, clearly shocked by what had come out. But Arthur grinned. It felt good to make light of it. Most people looked at him with alarm, as though his situation was contagious or worse. They looked at him with pity. As Felicity paused to take a breath, Maudie saw her chance. He was struck by lightning twice in one day in a storm in the Northern Isles. The first bolt took his hand, the next his elbow. Felicity laughed. Ha ha! What a yarn, no mistaking. Before anyone could say another word, she escorted them up the steps. Underneath the number 4, on the wall, a brass plate read Aurora Heights. Dad had told Arthur a story about Aurora, strange magical lights of all colours which appeared in the furthest skies. Go on, one of you knock, said Felicity. You do it, Artie, said Maudie. The painted black door had a great brass knocker in the shape of a bird. Arthur thought it was a swallow. He lifted it up and let it go, the loud knock echoing in the street. After a moment, slow footsteps approached, and the door creaked open. An old man with collar-length white hair, combed neatly backwards, surveyed them from top to bottom. Can I help you? He said, in a voice raspy with the poshest uptown accent. He raised his V-shaped eyebrows. We're here for the evaluation, Maudie said. As he dipped forward, his body crawled over them. Your children, he said curiously. Arthur looked up. We're 12 and 2 moons. The butler shook his head, then gestured to Felicity. This is very irregular. Just the madam, I'm afraid. Look here, Felicity waved her hand. Welby, he said, giving the faintest dip of his head. Welby, this is my niece, and this is my nephew. Hugely knowledgeable. They're all in ship-like affairs. I completely vouch for their talents in... She looked at Maud. Engineering, Maud said proudly. Felicity gave an impressed nod. And... She looked at Arthur with an encouraging smile. All he could say was, knives in the kitchen? Felicity swallowed and raised her eyebrows. Yes, knives, such a talent. So where I go, they go. Besides, it says open evaluations. Ain't no age specified. Give them a chance, will you? She grinned toothily. Welby surveyed them, a small amused grin on his Welby surveyed them, a small amused grin on his lips. I suppose you better come in then. Did you hear my dog chewing all the way through? I'll see you later.